Hi, welcome to Silent Generation. I'm Joseph,
I'm Nathan.
and this week's topic is domestic travel. I just been traveling for the first time in a while, and just got me thinking about travel. And then we had seen Civil War for the last episode, and that was kind of just like a, I don't know, kind of a sadder take on interstate relations in America. And so I thought it'd be fun to talk about, I don't know, just like fun parts of America.
Yeah. And this episode is going to lean a bit more anecdotal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last few episodes have involved so much research. This one is just going to be us talking about our personal experiences. So to start out, what was the trip that you just went on?
I just came back from a bachelor party. This is the first bachelor party I've ever been to. I'm 28 now. I feel like this is when they start, you would think. But yeah, we went out to La Crosse, Wisconsin. We drove. I've been like not using my car because I need to make a repair. So I just hitched a ride. I didn't drive any portion of it. I feel guilty about that. But what was nice about it is that we actually got off the highway at some point. Like, I don't know, it's just not the most direct way or not the fastest way out to La Crosse. So we got to go through all these like farms, which was really cool. And like the usual thing you'd see sometimes on farms is like they'd have like a Trump 2024 like hastily painted sign. But we passed one farm that said like, I stand with Ukraine. Thank you, Dark Brandon. Like, go Joe Biden. Thank you. And it was like still in the kind of schizo type of font, I would say, but just with a very lefty message. And I was just thinking of like, wow, this guy must not have a lot of friends at like the farm and fleet or whatever, like where the other farmers hang out and socialize. Like this guy must be a pariah.
That reminds me of one time when I went out to some distant relatives' sunflower farm because I have some relatives in suburban Illinois. And another relative not on that side once described them as being like classy rednecks, where they're not really farmers, but they all like want to date farmers, I guess. But
they're all stealing farmer valor.
Yeah, one of them, he's like a podiatrist, but he leases his land to his farmer neighbors, and they have like sunflowers, and it's really pretty. Yeah. But on the way there, my sister, one of them is psychic. I haven't even gotten into that on the pod, but we were driving there. And my sister just like gasped out of the blue. And she was like, what the heck? And I was like, what? And she's like, there was a tornado here. And I was like, you experienced a ghost tornado?
I envy that kind of confidence to just like, oh, I'm having a moment. I'm having a vision. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like there's a psychic character on Frasier that they play for laughs and like no one takes her seriously. But I've never actually encountered that in person, and I know a lot of crazy people. So.
No, I mean, she's like the real deal. Like one time I brought her to
But you believe?
Oh yes.
I wish I believed, man. I always say that about ghosts, but psychics early.
Sometimes my relatives will predict something happens and then it does, and
all right,
kind of proves it to me. But no, one time I brought her to a seance because I did some ethnographic research on seances for a project, and she outdid the medium. She was like. She was telling people in the room, like, oh, when you talked about that dead relative, I saw this white flash. And I feel like that's them telling you it was okay. I was like,
damn, really stepping on her there. Yeah.
No, the medium actually like tried to rope my sister into being her predecessor, but she didn't take it up.
Protege?
Or no, to assume her role.
Oh, wow.
She like, I was at this, what's called like a spiritualist church, like 100 years ago when seances were big. There's still some church on the edge of the city. I feel like southwest or south side. But yeah, that's where we went for it. And hopefully she's doing well. Her name, I think, was Mahala Bacon.
That's a good name. That's a good name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we drove way out, to western Wisconsin. And this is on the Mississippi River, basically out there. And so we get to our Airbnb and it's just palatial. Like it's huge. It sleeps 15 people, but you could fit like so many more in there. Like, I don't really know what it was. I guess it must've been some family's retreat, like before the days of Airbnb, but since it's just been like a part of a compound, I would say basically if there's all these other Airbnbs that you can rent out there. And we just had the largest one and there was a hot tub, which I always appreciate. I didn't know how much I appreciated it, but it became like a joke over the trip of just how often I was going into the hot tub.
When I think about hot tubs, I just think about infections.
Yeah, they are gross. That was like the first joke we were making about it. But at some point, I don't know, after a few beers, there's nothing like the call of the hot tub. And the joke I hit on making was that they were just going to open up the hot tub and I'd be face down inside it dead because I was in there so much. But no, we had this great view from there. And then our idea was we were going to go canoeing, but it was way too cold to do that. So we went to downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin, and ended up joining like the senior bar crawl down there kind of on accident. Cause there's a UW school out there. And so we just wanted to get some drinks. We also did a barcade and an escape room. And these are like the two classic 2010s recreation things.
Yeah.
And it's funny that they have them in La Crosse, but admirably, they're like not a chain of anything. Or if they were like poorly. Basically, they were a little rough around the edges, I would say. The axe throwing / barcade place and the escape room. But the escape room was fun. I've done a few of those. And this one, like what it lacked in production value, it made up for in like pretty clever puzzles. It was just kind of bad that like, as we got in there was just a group of like children, like children leaving. And we're like, what are we doing? We just couldn't think of like what to do in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you think is like the updated sort of 2020s recreational activity?
I don't know. When that shuffleboard place opened up in Chicago, I was like, is this going to be a thing? Is there gonna be, pickleball? I guess, but that's not like, I don't know. That's so like outdoor. Like, yes, you can do it indoors, but it doesn't, it's like an actual sport. Like you need things that aren't actually like, they're just kind of gimmicky.
Yeah. Something you can do just once as opposed to like you need a membership.
Yeah.
Nothing's coming to me besides like slime making. But that's more like a children's recreational activity. Yeah. Adults don't do that.
Do people still paint on pottery?
Yeah, there are still pottery studios like Penguin Foot in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. That was a thing to do, I guess.
Yeah.
So shall we get right into it?
Yeah. So I guess when we start thinking about domestic travel, a good way to start out is to just like talk about the different forms and then share our relationships with them anecdotally. And these are going to be like road trips, air travel, train travel, and boat travel. So you just experienced road trip, and I have gone on too many because my boomer dad, like that's the primary way that he would like to get around when we were children. And it kind of made sense because he had 6 kids and he had this like Suburban, which to me as a young child looked massive, but I actually saw one recently, and the Suburban vehicle, it looked like I'm taller than it now. And it looks smaller.
They're still big though. I don't know. There was also like some model, I think it's one of the few cars that maybe got smaller over time. Because we had an old 70s Suburban at the summer camp, and I swear it was like larger than current cars. Like, I don't know. Those
SUVs are so much bigger than like when I saw a Suburban, from the 90s, like within the last few months, I was so tiny compared to it. But yeah, now these cars, like they've reached me at like chest level. Or no, they're taller than me, actually, I mean to say. But yeah, the Suburban did not seem like I would instantly die if it hit me, unlike SUVs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so where do you guys travel in the Suburban?
We'd primarily go to New York or New Jersey, where we had family friends. Also St. Louis, where we also had family friends. My dad and when my mom was still alive, they were friends with all of these like beatniks, I suppose is what you call them. Just like the most like eccentric, just the most like
bohemian maybe?
Yeah, bohemian. But yeah, just the most like eccentric, like introspective, but also like not very responsible and kind of weird boomers. Like they all seem like they could be librarians. But yeah, we would go to those places. And yeah, I guess the main downside for me with road trips is just as a child with nothing to do in the car, it really taught me to space out, which is one of my worst habits. It's like, which I think is actually just like disassociation now as an adult. But yeah, that's where it came from, and it's not the best habit. No. But yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of road trips. As an urbanist now, I can't go on them unless someone's driving me around. Also incredibly dangerous, like so much more dangerous than flying. Yeah. And it takes up so much time.
On the dangerous thing, I was driving with my mom and my sister in the car, and they were arguing. And I was just like zoning out, as I usually do during that. I guess dissociating a little bit. But a semi-truck in front of me just like blew out a tire, started careening like across the road, basically. And I didn't flip over or anything, and it like went off to the side. But I just like I did the right thing. I just like checked my mirror to the right, and then I like spun out. I like drove off to the side, and then like went around it and everything, and like recovered, and like everyone was quiet. And I just felt like, oh my God, I just saved everyone. And I was like, that should not be something that happens like on a way to travel. Like it shouldn't be up to you in any way. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. But I got them to stop arguing for like a second, and then they started again. And I was like, nope. No talking. I saved everyone's life. I get what I want until we get to the gas station. But
I had moments like that as a kid when I would be in the car and people would get in almost car crashes or real car crashes. I guess more so almost car crashes. But when that would happen, me as a little kid, I can't really see out the window. I'm not tall enough to see what happened. And then I would always just act like nothing happened, and the adults would be like freaking out still.
It's not real to you because you can't see it. Yeah. We did a lot of road trips from Arizona to Las Vegas, and it was before they built the like giant bridge over the canyon. And so I could see it getting built when I was a kid. And I remember as a kid loving the like the power lines that go across, like they go from the Hoover Dam. Like I just thought they looked like big skeletons that were like careening off the sides of cliffs.
Is there a bridge going over the Grand Canyon?
Did I say Grand Canyon the whole time?
You said a canyon.
Oh, a canyon. No. This is just the Hoover Dam, like crossing basically. I don't know what that canyon's actually called. The Hoover Canyon maybe. But it like before that you would just drive across the dam itself. I don't know if people realize that, but there's just a 2-lane road like on top of Hoover Dam, and that used to be the only way across over there. And I don't know, it just feels very old school because it slows you down to a crawl, and you see like all the tourists and stuff around there, and you get to like rubberneck and look at the dam. So I mean, like obviously it's more efficient now the bridge is built, but I don't know. And then I took a lot of road trips in college, like from Chicago out to California and Las Vegas. Like one year it was a friend at a truck, and then another time I was driving my mom's Beetle. But we'd stay at like KOA campgrounds along the way to make it feel like more, roughing it, and also to save money. You can stay at a KOA campground for like $10-15 depending on where you are. But no, like, I don't know, it just reminds you of the like sameness, the non-placeness of like roadside towns. I did a road trip. I started dating this girl, and then like within a month of knowing her, I was supposed to drop her off at the airport. And then we overslept and we missed it. So I was like, I'll just drive you down to Florida instead. I have no job right now. And so I did, and we ended up like going on this cross-country road trip. From Chicago. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we drove all the way down to Florida in COVID, like in the middle of COVID. And then I stayed down in Florida for like 3 or 4 weeks with her and her family. Yeah, it was kind of, I don't know, an insane thing to do. And the drive back was kind of grim. I remember us stopping in some kind of like no-name suburb in Kentucky and just like stayed at the sketchiest hotel, and then just like looking on Google Maps at all of our options around there, and it was like the most evilly planned like suburban development, where it's just like Red Lobster, Denny's, like just all of those things, and they were all in their own independent roundabout, kind of not roundabout, but like their own petal of this flower. And I was just like, the vibes are so bad here. Like I don't want to like. I'm afraid of this place almost.
Yeah, I've met people from places like that where they come to Chicago and they're like, I want something that's not a chain. I'm so sick of the restaurants near my house. Yes, I avoid chain restaurants too, but like I can't imagine, like it's probably like what I experienced near the library I work with, like a limited number of restaurants. Although there actually is like a hoagie restaurant that just opened up near where I work that I feel like you'd like. But yeah.
I do like hoagies. You know me. I wanted to hate read this article today that like popped up on the Apple News thing, but it was about like the suburbs are good actually was the take. And I could only read the headline because I didn't want to pay the Atlantic for the whole article. But it was like, if every place looks the same, then you can be nostalgic wherever you are. And I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, nostalgic for what is like the next part of that question. For like a time that you were in a Denny's with friends. Like, I guess, yes, you can have a really good time with friends in a Denny's, but like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like when articles like that pop up for me in Google News, they're usually written by like libertarian magazines like Reason or like other conservative publications. And yeah, they have an agenda when they're writing those. And it's nice, but it's also like, come on, I feel like you should probably try to hide your tracks more than so clearly be like trying to manipulate me.
Yeah.
And so then for the next section, let's talk about air travel. So for me, I actually like I didn't travel by plane very much as a kid because we had so many children, and putting them all on the plane, I guess, was too crazy because we're rambunctious, but we would generally not fly. But we did fly when we were going to California generally because that's where my mom's family is from. And I didn't really start to do it though regularly until I entered college. And then I met my friend Nevada, who was there for 1 year with me at SAC. And she's like a New York native, grew up in Park Slope. Her mom has a hair salon in Park Slope, actually. And so I went with her there. And then on the way back, there was this like weather event. I think it snowed and the flight was delayed. And then JetBlue gave me like a $200 flight voucher. And so then I got to take that flight voucher and go to New York again the next year. And then there was another snowstorm. And this time I got a $600 flight voucher.
Whoa.
And so I kept going back to New York like all the time.
Whoa.
And yeah, she taught me how to like travel and get around. And this was actually before I had a smartphone even. So I was like in New York City with like a regular cell phone.
Whoa.
At one point, she let me go out on my own, and I called my sister in Chicago, and I was kind of messing with her, but I actually had no idea where I was. And I needed some help figuring out where to go. Mm-hmm. Also, their train system is definitely more confusing for outsiders because of the local and express service. It's much more complicated than the CTA.
No, I know the CTA used to have some weird stuff like every other stop.
Yeah, like, skip stop service with A stations and B stations. Some stations were both A and B, but it allowed us basically to kind of run express service all the time without
low grade.
Without
express,
being triple or quadruple tracked.
Yeah.
But I've been learning recently that like so many parts of the system used to be triple or quadruple tracked. Like the southern branch of the Green Line, it still has a space for a third track in between the double tracked line because it used to have express service during rush hour. And then the Congress branch of the Blue Line, before it was torn down to create the highway, that was quadruple tracked.
That's crazy. I don't know. It's just like, that's a lot. Yeah.
No, there's actually like, they built it in a way where I think it's supposed to have express service, but it's never needed it because they destroyed the whole neighborhood building the highway.
Nice. Problem solved. I don't need that express service anymore. It could be added
theoretically if we ever needed to. And then recently, actually this weekend, I went to this Brazilian restaurant, Sinha. Highly recommend it. It's in someone's house.
Yeah.
It's like this Brazilian woman's house, and we all ate at this buffet. But yeah, my friend drove me home, but we went underneath the Lake Street branch of the Green Line. That's the one that runs west. And part of it, I'm like so sure it must have been quad tracked because, you see this too with the Brown Line below, along where Merchandise Mart, Chicago, those stations. That was also quad track too. But yeah, anyways, all of these examples, the system used to have express service built into it in so many places.
Oh man!
And now it's only the Purple Line.
Yeah. Oh. Man, it's like, I don't know, you always look at like the map of like the rail coverage we used to have. And yes, now we've like passed that historic amount.
Yeah.
But you don't realize like that it was actually able to run more throughput basically as well. It was thicker, not just more spread out.
Yeah, we have more like track mileage now, but the more I learn about what the CTA was like when it was run by private companies, it seems like it was more efficient and better.
Look at us, libertarians over here, right as we were talking shit about libertarians. Maybe we should. I mean, isn't it all private companies in Japan, basically?
I haven't heard that.
But they have that like cooperative spirit that we don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, for you, did you travel much as a kid? When did you start traveling by air?
Yeah, military family, we started traveling instantly by air, basically. And then like like my parents took me out to see my grandparents before I was a month old. Like they were those assholes, like with the newborn child on the plane.
I feel like babies between 0 to 3 months don't cry as much.
Yeah, you might be right, actually, yeah. And they're definitely not like mobile, so they're not annoying in that way.
Yeah.
'Cause you see that sometimes, like, and they let the kid fuck around in the aisle a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, flying to Germany as kids, that was like wild. It's just like doing international travel at like 7 years old. Because even people who like, I don't know, maybe grow up with a lot of money and like travel to Europe every summer or something, I don't think you start that until the kids are a little older.
When they can remember things.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess if you're so rich, it doesn't matter if they remember it. You want to be in Paris, and then the nanny will just deal with the kids. But no. And then in Germany, we actually got to fly on military cargo aircraft for free, which was cool. But yeah, we just had to like, my dad just like, oh, there's a flight coming up to, I think we got to Crete that way or something. And so we got to ride on a C-130, and you sit in these seats that are made out of like canvas straps, basically like jump seats, I think they're called. But yeah, I remember I was playing with my Bionicle and I lost a piece and it like slid into some far recess of the C-130. And I'm like, God, I'm never getting that back again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminded me of like one of the times when I was a kid when I did fly out to San Francisco to see some family. I had gotten like a Game Boy Advance SP with Pokemon on it.
Nice.
And I looked down at it the whole time, my neck at like a really bad angle, and my neck was sore like the whole trip. I like didn't. Yeah, as a kid, you just don't realize stuff like that.
Yeah, that you have physical limits.
But the entire vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, like talking about like with road trips and stuff, like the battle against boredom, like my parents had it so tightly regimented. We actually had like a little travel TV. It was still it was a small CRT TV that we had in the Honda Odyssey that would be like parked on the little like tray table thing.
Yeah.
We'd watch on that. But then other times things would be happening outside the car and it would be Game Boys down, TV off, books down, whatever. Like you have to look at this like mountain or something. And I think it's super important. You have to do that with your kids. You have to enforce that. Like, I don't know whether they appreciate it in the moment or not. All right. So next is our favorite one, probably train travel. Probably the thing I've traveled the least by, but that I love the most maybe.
And you mean for interstate travel?
Yeah, for
domestic travel, not like daily basis.
Yeah, no, not like what is it, inner city train travel, like city to city.
Yeah, I mean for me, I don't have that much experience with Amtrak. When I first started, I guess the first time I ever used it was I met this guy who had gone to U of I and then graduated, got a job in Champaign-Urbana, and then was living there. And then I met him in Chicago, and he invited me out the next weekend to go visit him, and I took Amtrak there, and it was really nice.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. It's just the speed it goes at and the views. It's like a good experience.
I would just say it's very human scaled in a lot of ways. Like, yes, we should have high speed rail. Like that's amazing stuff. Like I've ridden on what I believe is high speed rail, or it seemed pretty fast to me in Germany when I returned as an adult. But like, there's the fact that you're at the level and you can see things. Even better is like a double decker. Anytime you have that, I forget which Amtraks have that, but like Metra cars have that. But then also like the space you're given, like since it's not such a precious commodity like on
there's
planes,
a lot of legroom.
Yeah, there's like crazy legroom. You can like I've been on empty Amtrak, so you get to sit with basically infinite legroom in front of you, and you can just sprawl out. And then like you can just kind of get up and walk around if you want to. Which yes, you can do that on the plane, but that's kind of like, come on, man.
The cafe car sounds like a cool idea. But it actually isn't as impressive as I hoped. It's not like a full restaurant.
No,
the restaurant cars
are
different.
It's much more cafeteria-esque, I would say. It kind of has the vibes of like, I don't know if your school had like a snack shop in it during lunch, but like during lunch, a few students would man like this just like window that had like Takis for sale or something. And that's what it feels like. I remember like I like ordered a sandwich or something from the Amtrak dining car on the Wolverine, which goes out to Ann Arbor. And she's like, oh yeah, the sandwich, all right, coming right up. And then she like pulls it out of the plastic and puts it into the microwave. I was like, I don't know what I was expecting. But yeah, on high speed rail in Germany, we went from Berlin to Munich, and I was in the dining car there, and I got a beer and some currywurst, which is like, chopped up bratwurst with some spicy sauce on it, spicy for Germans. And then the beer they gave me in a full 16-ounce glass, like Pilsner glass, which I was so not expecting, but the train is so smooth that you can like just totally have glass without worrying about it knocking over.
Yeah. I've only taken Amtrak a couple of more times since I went down to see that guy who ended up pseudo ghosting me, I think, because he didn't like that I went to art school. But joke's on him, because I then went to U of I for my master's.
Yeah.
So I
showed him.
But I did it online. But I did go down several times because I was part of a research project on how to make makerspaces more accessible for blind and visually impaired people. Because prior to my current role and my role before that, but for 4 years, I worked at the Maker Lab for the library. And so I have, my library specialty is makerspaces to a degree, which I've sort of thought about doing an episode on, but it's also very nerdy. Yeah. I'm not even that much of a 3D printing enthusiast, but
we had one of those at like my college, of course. I mean, as a tech school, you have to. And I thought I would use it more than I would. I remember like touring there and I'm like, I'm just going to live here, man. I'm going to be inventing stuff all the time. I think I kind of fell away from that. I think I definitely, like, as a kid, you see yourself in the archetype of like, the brilliant inventor toiling alone. Then you learn that's not the way that technological progress is made anymore, But we still we yearn for that narrative. That's why I want to believe in like Elon Musk and stuff like that, or Tony Stark, just that like still solo inventors. And it's like, no, this stuff is done by gigantic corporations and research institutions.
Yeah, I mean, my grandfather actually invented a few things like Dixie cup dispensers, if you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Nice.
Yeah, he was a model maker for Sears. He had a couple of patents. But yeah, what I do is relatively similar to my grandfather in a way where like I can create 3 models but using digital tools. For him, he could like, he later in life, he had a stroke and couldn't really use one side of his body, but he could like still model things with one hand. Like he could do a self-portrait of you with one hand after a stroke. He was very talented. Yeah. Model making is so different than it used to be.
Yeah, no. I always liked 3D modeling. I learned it like in college, and then I was kind of a CAD monkey at my first job.
I learned it in high school with anime girls.
Yeah, yes, that 3D animation too. I did learn it in high school as well. We used Autodesk Inventor. But yeah, I don't know, 3D printing and stuff always reminds me of, I used to scroll through Kickstarter back in the day, and I feel like that's where like the idea of the solo inventor lives on, of a guy with a kind of crazy idea, but if you just throw like, $20,000 at him, you can get this. They're often like pretty useless little things is what people are designing on Kickstarter, like a stainless steel top that spins forever and stuff. But.
No, I mean, 3D printing is actually like very powerful, and that the means of production are now widely available. And there are so many cool machines that like you could not get parts for now, but like you can make them yourself. Like, and with 3D scanning, it like that's available to people in a way that it never was before.
I remember seeing someone like bought this super fancy European like baby stroller, and then they broke like one little part of it, and the company was like, that's an old model, we're not going to provide that. And it was just like, there was like, if I didn't have 3D printing, I don't know what I would do with this, like whittle it out of wood or something, or like, because it was like a plastic piece, so it'd be hard to like, machine shop it out of metal or something.
Yeah. You know what I once had to do for someone at the Maker Lab that was honestly so difficult? What he brought in was like this one piece from a train set for his kid where like, there's all these tracks that you link together, and one section was missing, and he's like, I need to duplicate this one. Scanning that though, when it's that flat.
Oh yeah,
like
the smallest differences.
Because like the type of scanner we have, like if you flip the object over, it could not register. So, but we managed to do it because we had this very old program on our computer. Why is Prussia Mini coming to my name? No, it's like, anyway, basically the only thing it's good for is like slicing models in half, and then it can generate a cap for you.
No.
Very simple. It's great to use, but yeah, I managed to do, but that was so difficult.
Yeah. No, you don't realize how like detailed things are until you start scanning stuff. And you're like, oh wow, like the human eye can pick up so much that like sometimes computers at the consumer pricing scale have difficulty registering. Yeah. On Amtrak, I also had an Amtrak journey of like breaking up. It was never something that was like real, but yeah, I took like a sad solo Amtrak trip back from seeing a girl. And I would say it's better to be sad on a train than sad on a plane. I don't know. It felt like more old school. It felt Lindy,
No, I was kind of sad after I saw that guy for the last time, because I kind of had the feeling, although I don't know, it's just, I would always worry after my second or third time seeing people. So I was worried on their train ride home. And yeah, it is nice to be sad on a train.
Yeah. Most recent train trip, I went out to Milwaukee to see friends, and they were at like they were doing a bar crawl, and it was pretty close to the train station, but not really walking distance.
Yeah.
So I got to the train, and I got into the Milwaukee Intermodal Station, and I took their bike share program, the Bubbler bike, as it's called.
Yeah.
And it's very underdeveloped compared to Divvy, I will say, but it got me where I needed to go. So I just like appeared there, and everyone's like, oh, where did you park? Where did you like all that? And it's like, I took the train. I took public transit. But then I did hitch a ride with a friend back home. So that was nice. Yeah. And that's like a really short trip. The one to Milwaukee, that's just like an hour or so. And there used to be all these like interurban train lines, not just out to a city's suburbs, but like to other cities. Like the little summer camp I went to is a 30-minute drive west of Milwaukee, and there used to be like an electric trolley service out there, which is like hard to imagine.
Yeah, there's only 2 or 3 interurbans in existence today that have been operating for like 100 years. One of them is the South Shore Line in Chicago, which goes from Chicago into Indiana and stops in Gary and things like that. But yeah, Milwaukee, it fits in this like Goldilocks zone. So City Nerd, this transit YouTuber.
You have very similar vibes to him. Have people told you that?
No, do not say that.
What?
No, I'm cooler than that.
You are cooler than him, yeah.
Yeah.
But you guys have a very like consistent tone, I would say. He's gay, right?
I don't know if he's gay, but I'm hotter. So.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that.
Okay, no, I do not aspire to look like him. Okay. Okay, but he does have good videos sometimes, although most of them are a bit boring. They're just like top 10 videos. Yeah. But his very first video is on like what would be the best like candidates for high-speed rail corridors in the US, and he includes this like chart. It's basically plotting when planes, cars, and trains become their most like desirable. And basically trains are their best at like the 2 to 3 hour range for like conventional trains. For high-speed rail, a better way to think about it is like at the 250-mile mark. So Milwaukee is really within that range because the train is like a 2-hour trip. So because you need to get to airports 2 hours in advance, it makes the train more desirable than flying to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So it's in that sweet spot. But if it's less than 2 hours, if something's an hour, usually people with cars, they will choose to just drive to a place.
Yeah. I guess we could squeeze this in as like an appendage to train travel and to car travel. But like, what's your Greyhound experience?
I've never been on one.
Oh no, I took one to Canada. You can do that. You can take one to Toronto. So that's the only time I've been in Detroit, and it was at the Greyhound terminal there, which feels like an airport, but if everyone was homeless.
Yeah,
is what I'd say. We have one in Chicago, which is the same vibe. But I don't know. There every so often a company pops up that wants to like luxury buses, basically, that'll take you from place to place. I'd like to see those be a thing. I watched a video. They're like very much a thing in Korea. Like it'll be a bus, and then on either side of the aisle is only one. Like there's only one seat, one row per side. Yeah, and they're giant lay flat seats with privacy screens. And stuff. And like, I would take that anywhere. That sounds amazing. Like we've already built all this highway infrastructure. Like, I don't know. I want to believe in high speed rail and all that, but I feel like a really zhuzhy bus would get me there.
Yeah. But the thing with buses is there's always going to be that like jerking motion of stopping and starting because of traffic.
Oh yeah.
That just isn't pleasant.
No.
But yeah. And then on boat travel. So I actually traveled on boats more than like planes or trains as a kid because we had a boat in the backyard. Like where I grew up in Chicago is along the Chicago River, near the Rockwell Brown Line station. Generally, there aren't homes along the river. It's this big exception. It's a very fascinating neighborhood, though, Ravenswood Gardens. And yeah, we would take the boat out, to like Michigan on the 4th of July.
What did you guys do in the winter with the boat?
I would just be out there. It wouldn't freeze over.
Oh.
Yeah.
The North Branch doesn't freeze over there?
No, it doesn't. Yeah, there's water treatment that keeps the water warm, I think.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But yeah, the surface never actually gets, maybe the edges get icy, but it never freezes over.
Wow.
But yeah, so it would just be out there. And yeah, other times too, like with my family's beatnik friends, there was this couple that we were friends with that they had like a garlic farm in Galena, and they really liked going along the Mississippi. And so I was on the Mississippi a lot as a child.
Wow. Yeah, I was really blown away by the Mississippi when I was out there this weekend. I was just like, wow. It was this part of the Mississippi that like basically forms these large lakes or these small lakes that are just like, I imagine just lazily flowing wider parts of the river, but it's huge. Like the Colorado River is large, but we're able to dam it. And then just, and the Mississippi River, like, I'm like, damn, I see what Mark Twain saw in this. This is huge.
Yeah, I haven't been there as an adult, but I do remember it being like really wide when I saw it as a kid. I haven't seen it at least since I was like 10, I think. So yeah.
I used to sail. I did sailing for a summer out of Montrose Harbor. I just joined like the yacht school thing. And it was fun. It was on like Tartan 10 sailboats, which have crews of like 5 to 6 people, I'd say. You could do 4 to 5. It just wasn't as like physically active as I thought it was going to be. I thought I'd be like leaning off the side and like kind of dramatic stuff, but I don't know. Everyone has a little small role to play in it, basically. I had a really fun captain. He was this really crotchety old Jewish guy who lived in Skokie, and it was a dry boat, meaning no drinking on it, unlike most of the other teams.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just a very like it feels like such a privilege to be out there on the water sailing when you don't own a boat. It's just like, oh wow, thank you, Captain Steve, for taking on all this capital expenditure. And I just. Like people always think like, oh, you're sailing, Joseph. It must be a very rich hobby. And it's like, no, to crew on a boat, they won't pay you, but you can do it for free. Essentially, you just got to bring all your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading a book called Rust, the Longest War, which is a book on rust and American infrastructure. And I'm not that far through it, but it starts out with this really funny passage on boats where the author says, they say a lot of things about boats. They say a boat is a hole in the water that you throw money into. They say boat stands for bring out another 1,000. They say that the pleasures of owning and sailing a boat are comparable to standing, fully clothed, in a cold shower while tearing up $20 bills. Consequently, They say that the best day of a sailor's life, aside from the day he buys a boat, is the day he sells it.
Yeah, it's like crazy how much boat maintenance costs. I had a coworker who had not a sailboat, like a power boat, which my former Captain Steve would always say that, power boaters are the lowest form of life, is what he always said.
Is that just a boat with an engine?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
The boat we had when I was growing up, it was a boat my grandfather had built, the model maker, and it was a sailboat that he turned into a motorboat.
Well, that's still a sailboat. Like if it still has a sail, it just has like the boat I sailed in had a little tiny dinky motor that you would just use to basically to get out of a marina, and then you'd sail out of there.
I can't quite recall there being a sail on the boat. I think he
he fully converted it. Oh wow.
Yeah, because he was worked with his hands. He was good at that sort of thing.
But yeah, it's like such a different culture from sailing to power boating, like especially like pontoon boats. Those are definitely like the working man's boat in the Midwest. The vibe there is like it's a boat that's not good for much besides standing around and like drinking beers and fishing too. But yeah, like it's one of those classic things where like the more convenient thing becomes a signifier of lower classes, and then the harder to do, more expensive, more time consuming thing belongs to the upper classes, where like sailing has this whole adherence to like only, sailing on your own, on the power of the wind and all that. And I think people with less free time are more just like, I want a guaranteed good time. I want to take my pontoon boat out in the local lake. I don't want to be like caught on a windless day or anything. They just want like a guaranteed good time.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll talk about this, like we talk about like American nature tourism and stuff, but like it's interesting what is the, left leaning way to enjoy nature and the right leaning way to enjoy nature, because like the right leaning way seems to be the one that involves like motor power and things, or ATVs or stuff like that. And then like the left leaning way is to like go full REI, lightweight backpacking, gorpcore kind of stuff.
Yeah. To just look at things.
Yeah, basically, like not fishing, not hunting.
Yeah, because as an urbanite, like speaking as one, like I very rarely leave the city limits. I'm not in nature, and so I don't need that much for it to be like a new or exciting experience. But for people who live in the countryside, they need to add things to nature because they already live in it. They see it every day.
Yeah. No, I do want to get into hunting and fishing though. I'm really curious about those.
What do you want to kill?
White-tailed deer, I'd say. Yeah. That's what my dad would hunt out here in the Midwest. Then mule deer, like out in Colorado, you can go there. But yeah, and then in fishing, there's like kind of a class divide as well, where like conventional reel and rod, like spinner fishing, I think I learned from a quick Google last night. That is like the average Joe kind of stuff. And then fly fishing is someone who would go to like Orvis or Outfitters or something like that and get like the full setup, and then it's harder and you get less fish and you have to like go out to a mountain stream and stand in it and stuff. But I think it's that delayed gratification that all these like sailing and things like that are kind of built around.
Yeah. And so I think we kind of, when addressing boat travel though, I think we got a little bit too into the recreational sense. Oh, yeah. It still does happen, for cruises. Yeah. That's like one way that it does happen, which I've never been on. Closest I've been to that is being at a resort in Cancun, which I assume is a very similar experience.
Yeah. My family, we went on a cruise down the Nile. It was one of our last trips when we were in Germany. And we were just like, all right, this will be like the big one. We're going to go on a cruise down the Nile. And all the boats there, or all the ships there, are like built to the exact same size. It's the maximal size of the smallest lock on the Nile. And when we got to that smallest lock, like they fold down the umbrellas on top so it can fit under the bridges. Like everything is within a foot, I would say, clearance from every side. And like my dad's pretty tall, so he had to like lie down on a deck chair in order for us to like fit through the lock. But then there's like the places where the boat's docks are not large. So each boat kind of like runs up parallel to the last one. They kind of double park themselves and triple park. And then so one time our boat got kind of late to a spot. So we were like 8 boats deep. And so we had to walk through essentially 8 different boat lobbies to get to land. And each one had like a different style on the inside of it. It was a really like surreal experience. But yeah, but I think that those are like not there's anything wrong with a cruise to nowhere type cruise. But the Nile cruise is just truly the most efficient way to see like the entire like society is built along the Nile. You might as well travel along there. It would be much slower to take.
Yeah, I mean, it's Egypt. I feel like is a little bit. It's not like Turkey where you might get kidnapped and mutilated, but yeah, I would probably feel better being on a boat.
Oh yeah. No.
Although I'm probably gonna go to Brazil within the next like 3 months.
Oh wow.
Which I won't get ahead of myself, but yeah,
this is a domestic travel episode. Okay.
I know.
We're supposed to be extolling the virtues of American
but there are
travel.
like cruises that happen like domestically. Like
yeah.
when I visited Milwaukee in April, I went on a boat tour, and they mentioned like, oh yeah, we're getting like 6 cruise ships per year. It's increasing a lot.
Oh, that's
like,
cute. Yeah. There's like Great Lakes cruises. Yeah, that's something about like, the different types of, I guess I'm just keep on talking about different class divisions, but like if there's Carnival cruises and there's also like the Viking cruises and the ones that do like European rivers. And then also there's like Great Lakes stuff. It's the more like boring kind of stuff that I think attracts like older people.
So the less tropical, the more classy it is?
I think so, strangely enough. I think that it's like, of course, rich people still go to tropical places. Like everyone enjoys them. Not everyone, but yeah, I think it's like almost a show off of like, yeah, we really enjoyed our cruise down the Rhine, like river in Germany.
But yeah,
no, I love warm weather. I always say this, that it's like a treat at the end of a hardworking Midwestern life. Is like you get to retire to Florida at the end, but then like there's young people who grow up like 18 years in the Midwest, and the first thing they do is go to college in Florida, not in search of academic rigor, but in search of like it being warm. Oh, and then when we were on this bar crawl in La Crosse, Wisconsin, I was just striking up conversations with strangers, and this one girl, I was like, well, why did you choose La Crosse? And she was like, the bars. So she said, I was like, great of you to admit that. Like, keep saying that to people. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, one boat travel thing I do want to do is I want to take the ferry from Milwaukee to Muskegon. There is not a ferry that leaves from Chicago and goes anywhere for some reason. I think that's kind of a missed opportunity. Yeah. Like wouldn't people want to, like, especially like lake house people out in like the west coast of Michigan, like wouldn't they want that? I don't know.
Well, the west coast of Michigan isn't that populated. It's like because of lake effect snow. There's like Traverse City much farther away, but there's not like a big city in Michigan near Chicago.
Yeah. And then so like between all these types of travel, like how do Americans choose? Is there kind of
I think we can think about like whether or not they prioritize cost, convenience, or culture when deciding on to travel domestically. And so I think on cost, Americans don't really seem to prioritize it, but they still feel like entitled to get pissed off once they get the bill. They don't really seem to think about it in the right way anyways, though. Like, for example, with cars, like someone's auto loan and then their auto insurance are huge costs. Like for most Americans, it costs like $13,000 a year, which is crazy to me as someone who spends less than $1,000 a year on transportation. But yeah, more than $13,000 a year. But then they only really get upset about the price of gas, even though like they're paying way more for everything else.
It's a good way to think about it. Like, even if you do, I will sometimes admit that like owning a car is better than public transit, like depending on your life. Like in Chicago, it's a toss up on what neighborhood you're in, where your job is and all that. But even if you admit that owning a car is better than public transit, is it 13 times better?
Yeah.
Is a good question, I think. I mean, whatever you spend on Ubers and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
I mean, I don't think so. Cause like it only takes like 20 or 30 minutes longer. But honestly, every time I tell people like, oh, it's an hour from my house to here, there, or there, people are like, who do drive are like, it takes that long. Yeah. But it's like, I spend all my time at home, like on my phone anyways. It's not going to make.
What am I going to do if I get there earlier?
Yeah. And I do think that
it's like kind of nihilist. I don't know if I agree with that.
I mean, I do think public transportation is like the most convenient it's ever been, because like smartphones make it so much more entertaining. Like when I was in high school and I'd ride the CTA, I would just sit there and stare at people. There's nothing for me to do. It was actually like boring and miserable. And I looked forward to the day that I could drive. But now with like my ability to go read news articles or message people, it's like, it's much better than like driving.
I used to have like an hour 10 train commute. It had a lot of walking in it, and it had changing a line too as well. So there wasn't like huge uninterrupted things. But like I don't know if I'd super mind if I had like a quick walk to a train station and then a long ride and then a quick walk. Like, I don't know. Like, you can get a lot of like good shows watched and stuff. It's not too bad. With my car ownership thing, I'm trying to get out of it. Maybe I've been doing this like car free experiment where I just take the train and divvy bikes around. That's the bike share system in Chicago. And I've been really liking it. I tried it on purpose when the weather was bad. Because I wanted to see if I could stick it out when it's just, like 20, 30 degrees. I didn't start it when it was like 15 degrees. That's a much better test of if I can do this year round. But yeah, I have like a budgeting app and I figured out how much I spend on my car every month. And it's an embarrassing amount because it takes like all my single large things, like fixing one part of my car for $1,000 or something. And it amortizes it, splits it up into my monthly cost, like over the past 2 years. And it's a scary amount. I got to get that down.
Yeah. Vox Media, they just released like a new podcast episode on like car ownership and why it's getting expensive. Mm-hmm. And like auto insurance rates have gone up 40% since 2019. Yeah. And like the reason why your auto repair costs are so high is just because of the additional technology that car makers have put in their cars. It's like whenever there's an accident now, there's all these like little sensors that need to get fixed.
Wrong, yeah. Mm-hmm. Not in my 2007 Volvo V50 station wagon. No, I don't even have a tire pressure sensor. That thing is Spartan. Yeah. I've automatic.
I couldn't
headlights.
Even tell you. I had no idea how old your car was. I just assumed.
It's old.
But yeah, if you're still paying that much, other people are paying like triple with newer cars.
Yeah, like I don't have a car payment. Like the thing is paid off, but I still pay like through the nose for parking and insurance, basically. Yeah. That's how it is.
Do that.
Yeah, and then just I don't know on like modes of travel. Like I try and like figure out why exactly I bought a car in the first place. I have to put myself back in the position of how rough that commute was, like especially on like a snowy day, just trudging through like because I lived on the side of a highway, which is humiliating. I think I lived on the side of a highway. I would walk 15 minutes to the red line station where you then stand in the center of a highway, a dehumanizing experience.
Yeah.
And then you take that all the way up there and I'd emerge up in Ravenswood. And then it's like so jarring. Like you emerge on the brown line, one of the nicest lines, as we've said, and you're in this like leafy neighborhood with all these cute little single family homes and like apartment buildings and stuff. And it's like, oh man, like I came from like a rough part and now I'm here.
Yeah, no, I know what that's like. I have a very long commute to my current library where, for example, like I can take 2 trains or I can take 2 buses and 2 trains. Last night, this actually happens way more than it could, but like I took a bus to a train, to a train, to a bus. Longest I had to wait for something was 2 minutes and I got home in like 55 minutes. And like, but it involves so much like stress and me just like being like, I gotta go. There's this movie called like Run Lola Run.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
No.
It's like a German film. It's sort of famous for its like cinematography because it was sort of innovative in that it's just like this woman running around a city. But I feel like I'm like sort of like her.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just sprinting around. Yeah.
No, because I do sprint like almost every day to try to catch something or other.
I think I think when people choose transportation types, I think dignity is something you don't think about all the time.
Yeah.
Of like, as good as it feels like to be on the like rental bikes around there, when I get almost sideswiped by someone, it feels like a loss of like, hey, I'm a human being. And then when a bus gets messed up and then they're packing people into buses and you're all squeezed in there, you're just like, this doesn't feel dignified. Like I don't feel like there is something about like just coming out of your car, like clean and not sweating, not cold, anything that like that I think was maybe what drew me to it.
Yeah. And I feel like in Chicago with elevated lines, that feels like you're on top and the drivers are underneath because they are. But like subways feel a little bit nicer too. But when you're waiting for a bus, like personally, when I'm waiting at a bus at some random intersection in the middle of the city and I'm the only one, I do feel kind of embarrassed.
Yeah, it feels rough. Yeah. Someone talked about that in British versus American TV shows of how buses are used. Like in British TV shows, it's just another like kind of location just to have something. If you want to have 2 people have a funny interaction or a serious thing or like a phone call or anything, you just use the bus as it. But in America, we only use a bus if we're trying to show how depraved something is. Like how like someone is down on their luck, therefore they're taking the bus. In Nightcrawler, there's like, have you seen that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal?
I have not.
Basically, he's this like psychopathic guy who starts becoming a a news vulture kind of deal where he just tries to get to like car crash stories and take amateur video and sell it to news stations. And he hires just a kid to help him, like just like a young guy. And they show the guy takes like 4 buses to get to this job interview, like across LA. And it's like, look at how much this guy wants this job. He took buses. Like, isn't that, he took the bus in LA, you know, he's hard on his luck. Yeah. There's no dignity here.
I read something crazy where like LA needs to buy like, wait, I feel like this is off, but I also feel like it might not be. I think I read that they need like 6,000 more buses for the Olympics because it's going to be that congested.
They just borrow them from someone and give them back later. Like,
good point.
If every city donated 1 bus to LA, assuming that they would have a bus full of people who are going to LA, you know,
that's a good point.
They should hire me. It'd also be really cool to see a complete mix of buses somewhere, like every city's different bus, like all taking people.
Yeah. But yeah, to get back to the like cost, convenience, culture comparison. So on convenience, I have a friend whose name I will admit, who chastised me for taking a bus in LA. But she's pretty consistently, like over the course of me knowing her, alluded to like wanting to like performatively, you know, choose the more expensive option that saves time in order to like signal to other people or society at large that like they're important or like, you know, wealthy, I guess. It's more so, I guess, just the image though than like trying to be like, I'm purchasing this or this because I have money. It's more so just like, I want to prove that my time is worth something. Yeah. And so she really prioritizes convenience over anything else.
Yeah, I had a friend who would like get drunk and then order us Uber Blacks back from the club, which is like, and it would take longer for us to get the Uber. We'd like be out there in the cold in like just dress shirts or something because we didn't bring jackets. And he's like, oh, it's almost here. It's almost here. And then he would complain later about people like using him for Ubers because he was always the one to jump and order an Uber. And it's like, you have gotten exactly what you've set up. Like you've like, you know, given this like Playboy image of all that. Then people kind of like, people pick up on that and people find a way to use it.
What's interesting though is that same friend, she has lived in New York, and when she's in New York, she's happy to take the subway. She thinks that's normal because it's the most convenient, fastest way to get around. Driving is not faster. And so, yeah, it's not for her personally like a cultural thing, which we'll get into in the next section of like, I grew up one way, I prefer that way. It's just in whatever way she can signal her time is valuable, that's what she's going to do.
Yeah, I forget where I was reading this about like New York City driving, but some writer was talking about just like the culture of people who drive in Manhattan. Like it's almost they do it because it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like they're like masochists who just love the like the difficulty of it. Like, oh yeah, I do it at the hardest place to drive, but I always find a spot. Like they hold that as if they have any like sway over that. But I've like kind of felt that about myself too, of like my ability to spot a spot and get into a small spot and know where they are intuitively. I'm like, for some reason, proud of this. And it's like not a skill. I don't think like, I don't know.
Yeah. Growing up, my parents would say to each other, like my dad had parking karma, but my mom didn't. It would always take her a long time to find a spot.
My mom, whenever she finds a spot that's close to the front, she's like, prime parking. And she says, and it's like, it's like bled into other people in our family saying it. But I don't know. It feels so cringe now that I watch like urbanist content and you hear about how like people will do anything for the most minimal walk. Yeah. You know, like people will do anything. Like cities will build like large parking garages, like public free parking garages, and people will fill up all the street parking first before that. Like it's a little grim.
But yeah, I wonder for how many Americans though, it's convenience first. Ultimately, I don't really think like my friend's view is that common. I think it is largely more cultural because like people, when they travel place to place, they usually, their preferred transit mode is what they try to bring with them when they go somewhere else. Like there's this news article about when an American tourist tried to drive a car across this really famous bridge in Florence, the Ponte Vecchio, which is like this jeweler's bridge, which has buildings on it. It's very iconic. But yeah, it's a pedestrianist area. Like I don't even know how he managed to get a car on this bridge, but like he got like halfway through before he finally stopped and everyone was like, what are you doing? But like to him, that was just how he got around. And so for me, like when I travel, Well, I do prioritize cities that have public transit and have subways and light rail, but that's what I do reflexively. That's just what's normal.
Yeah, you just know it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for other people, it's largely cultural because Americans have money. They also are kind of dumb. And so I don't think convenience really factors in that much. I think it's primarily cultural.
No, I don't think. I was thinking about this. Like, America does not have a love affair with the car. I think we've truly made it the most convenient thing in most situations. Like, I think it is a pretty rational choice when people do it. But when it's not rational, people can't adjust course, basically. Like, I was thinking about the time that we went to the beach, and I was like the one person who biked there. Everyone else like got there somehow, and then there was one car, and then we were going to a pizza restaurant after. Yeah. And everyone's like, all right, well, I'll pile into the car and go. I was like, all right, see you guys there. And I waited 40 minutes for everyone. Like, I was just there waiting. And it's like, it's just, people don't know how to change tack for something. But like, Americans know that like when they travel to Europe, they're not going to drive around. I mean, sometimes we'll rent cars and stuff, but.
Yeah, I mean, you could ask yourself whether or not it's like convenience or culture. Because I guess, honestly, like, cars are still generally faster. Like I have come to sort of recognize that I think for most Chicagoans, they think of the CTA, the L lines, as just being like one big contraption to get to and from downtown.
Yeah,
like
it's built like that.
It is. But yeah, like they'll use the CTA just for downtown. And like
they won't use it on weekends or anything.
They just use a car,
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know though. I think the case can be made that it is cultural. Because we have, this will blow people's mind, but if you look at like, America supposedly doesn't have that much public transit. But if you look at like the Wikipedia page on metro systems, America has like the second most number of rail lines, second most number of stations, second longest.
Come on, that's just because of our size, basically. Like as a country, like.
But still, our ridership could and should be so much higher. We have the capacity to move so many more people on these systems than we currently are. Yeah. But yeah, no, I piss off all the transit nerds when I say that because I'm not a simp for Japan. I'm not a weeboo. I'm not interested in learning about like Tokyo's metro system.
It feels like so, like incompatible. Like that doesn't really matter here.
Yeah.
Like,
I exclusively know about American systems and a little bit Canada because there's all these transit YouTubers in Canada.
Yeah, I feel like I almost like that there's like there's so far to go in America when it comes to like making places more livable. It seems like something's attainable. Like, and also when you see places that have attained like wonderful urbanism, like the Netherlands, like the people. Wow, I'm just gonna say the people kind of suck in Netherlands is what I've heard broadly about them. Is that like they're just very cheap, cold people. Not to hate on the Dutch, but. You're allowed to do it. It's like Italians. You can always do the accent. It's not racist.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
also in urbanist circles, ever since Just Not Bikes dunked on the entire North American continent, people, it's popular to make digs at the Netherlands.
Yeah, no, it's good. They've had it too good for too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like the idea of just taking all the best parts about America, but then like taking away the car. Basically. But on the cultural part of like driving and all that, like, man, people treated me like a freak ever since I started biking to job sites and stuff. Like, I remember getting this when I took the train to job sites in the beginning. Like, everyone's just like, why? How? Like, all those questions. But, I don't know. Yeah, people just can't like.
You also probably look Mormon.
Yeah, so me being on a bike, that's why I'm resolving this summer no short sleeve dress shirts, so I don't get people yelling Mormon at me.
There are a ton of Mormons that come into the library. I've been seeing them ever since I started at the library, and for the longest time, I always thought they were like teens. But then there was this brief period where I was like a teen librarian, and
they're always at least 18.
But yeah, I got the reason finally to like ask them their age, and I was like, "Oh, are you a teenager?" They never were, but they always look young to me. I'm always like. Yes, they look mature for their age, whatever their age is, but I always like assumed they were younger than they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of like me looking like a Mormon, something that happened in La Crosse, we can cut this out maybe, but I was just in a bar and a random person just grabbed me on the shoulder and said, "You look like British or Czechoslovakian." And I was like, my family was in the Czech Republic before America. I was like, I said but I'm actually Jewish. And he just slaps me in the back and he goes, "No, you're not." And then he walks out of the bar. And I was like, oh man.
I'm sure he's an expert.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also do want to go on a little bit of a tangent on the culture thing. I mean, in this section,
so what we do is cultural analysis, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it's culture of the three factors, but I want to go on this fun tangent. So basically, it seems like for cultural reasons, road trips are the default of the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And there are a ton of memes about this. Like there's this post, I guess I'll link it in the show notes. It's from the Facebook page Midwest versus Everything, but someone on the page made this post that was like, why would I fly if it's only a 14-hour drive?
Yeah.
And I feel like that sort of is the Midwestern attitude because we are centrally located. So people on the coast, it's a bigger deal for them to go to like from New York to LA or from like Seattle to Houston. But when you're in Chicago or one of the Midwestern states, like they're all like within spitting distance, 10-hour drives.
Yeah.
And so people consider that more. And I do think it demonstrates though how this is cultural, because in this instance, flying is definitely more convenient. It's definitely cheaper, but like Midwestern people just do it because that's what they know. It's same with boomers. It's like, that's what's been ingrained and instilled into them. It's what they do reflexively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then like, so like the opposite of that, of how like Midwesterners are like willing to drive these large distances and stuff. I think Europeans have a difficulty understanding the distances in America. Yeah. There was this case of these German tourists in Death Valley who had rented a car and had gotten like lost or turned around heading to like some hiking spot. And then they just like got stuck in the middle of nowhere. They had no car trouble, I don't think. I'm trying to, or maybe they underestimated it, but like in the kind of forensic analysis of this case, they basically kind of came to the conclusion that like German people just didn't understand how far you can drive in America and not find anything. Yeah. Basically. And so like I think they basically like kept on driving, didn't see anything, and then turned around to try and like go back to where they were. And it's like, no, keep driving. Like then you'll find something.
Yeah, I think I've heard about that too. It's sad. They like all died.
Yeah. But no, I think we need those like reminders that America's nature is serious. You know, like we have true extremes out here.
Yeah. And so do you think those German tourists, were they visiting a national park? That's their next section.
Oh, excellent. Subway, Nathan. It's a segue, sir. Told you I'm hungry. I think it's Subway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the national parks are like, you know, obviously like an amazing asset of the U.S. and something that is, I don't know, like I think it's one of the things that Europe has kind of caught up to us on.
Yeah, they were invented here.
Yeah, we did it first, basically, Teddy Roosevelt, because there's this whole naturalist movement in the late 1800s where people start to really like appreciate the nature we hadn't destroyed.
Yeah. But yeah, with this week's episode, I tried to do a little bit of research into national parks and why they're popular. I got really bored. I'm not really a nature person, but I did find enough charts to tell me that like, okay, there's been this popular idea that like national parks are like more popular than ever, but proportionally, like it's kind of flat. Like the number of visitors the parks get each year, it has not really gone up. It's just that like we have a limited number of parks and they have like legacy infrastructure that's not built for the number of visitors they're getting because the population's increased. So you will hear these accounts of like there just being like too many people trying to get like to or from Yosemite or like another park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like in the national parks, they've made more of them recently. Like state parks get like kind of promoted and brought into the.
There's way more protections, and then just culturally, we do treat national parks so much more better and from a like preservation angle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, pretty close to Chicago, our closest national park is the Indiana Dunes, which is basically I think in the borders of Gary, Indiana. The city itself, it's like. But it is, unlike the Gateway Arc in St. Louis, it is actually like more of a natural area. But yeah, that became a national park in 2019.
Yeah. I know that like, post-COVID, that was the big thing of like, oh, since we closed down everything else, people started flooding into national and state parks. I think there was probably some staying power to that. I think once you go to them, like you don't just like one and done. You're probably like, oh yeah, this is a great thing to go to.
Yeah.
My ex had a national parks pass. We used that all the time. We got to use it like in the dunes, actually. We got like discounted camping or something like that.
I've been thinking about trying to do a meetup with the friends there. Taking the South Shore line.
Yeah, no, I've been trying to think of a good like train trip with a group of people. I think dunes could be good.
Because that's a day trip that doesn't require friends like, getting a hotel. But the South Shore line.
I want to do it longer. I want to do like a Holland, Michigan hotel kind of thing. I think that's
I'm down. I have the time, but
I do not.
But no, the South Shore line is, I mentioned earlier, that's one of the interurbans. So that line that goes farther out into Indiana, it stops in Gary, and it also has like a stop for the Indiana Dunes. It's very easy to take a train from Chicago out there. Yeah. But yeah, in researching the Indiana Dunes for this week's episode, I actually learned that they have rattlesnakes, the Eastern Mississauga rattlesnake.
Yeah, no, the Airbnb we were at in West Wisconsin had all these, like, it had like, here's where you put your trash, like, please take off all the sheets at the end, and then watch out for rattlesnakes on the property. And I was just like, man.
Yeah,
the Midwest is a little more wild than you'd think, but not like drastically. So
I mean, I've seen a bunch of snakes on like Beaver Island and Garden Island, which are lakes in Lake Michigan, but that's like the only place I've ever really seen snakes in the Midwest.
There's a garter snake that's only in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I stepped on one in Bridgeport. I stepped on a garter snake in Bridgeport. I don't know. I just kept on walking, but it felt like stepping on a hose. Is what I'd say, like a hose full of water. Yeah, and I went like, I'm a real heel strike type of walker, and
I just got a cramp in my bicep.
But yeah, and so like, we're talking about, we'll kind of get into next is that like why we're talking about domestic travel, and it's because like it feels like international travel is just like such a powerful thing in people's mind. Like, as an American, you get like 2 weeks off. You're like, all right, I might as well really spend it on like a big trip out and like see Europe, Asia, somewhere tropical. But, international tourists come to America for our national parks. Because it's not something they can get back home. And I feel like that's, like the only things that Europeans come here for is they go to like national parks, Disney World, New York City, and California / LA, basically. But I mean, foreign tourists come to Chicago, but we have like nowhere near the pull as like New York City.
Yeah, I think we're like a top 10 city for tourism, but yeah, we're not like near the top. Even though we are cool, you should visit us. I think that like generally people should try to go to like cities that are the second or third biggest in a country to experience authenticity.
Yeah, no, the second banana cities, as I often call them.
But yeah, I myself have not really been to many national parks. I did go to the Indiana Dunes as a kid, and then a few years ago, I got to go to Yosemite with my uncle, and it was so much driving.
Yeah.
So
that's like the next thing we can talk about is that like nature is just so linked up with car culture in America in a way that's not always the case in other places. Like I know in France, you just take like the train out to a little like mountain town. The train pulls right up to the resort. And you just walk in with your skis, basically. And there was like a spot on the train for you to load in your skis and all that. But in America, it's just like skis go on top of the Subaru and you just gun it towards, Yeah, well, you learned that actually from a article.
I knew that before. I guess you did. But no, I listened to a podcast episode from Upzoned who have actually linked on Spotify. I have Spotify for podcasters. I linked our 2 favorite shows in our bio, basically, or like in our suggested tab, because you can do that. So the 2 favorites of ours are Nymphet Alumni and Upzoned. And so Upzoned, Strong Towns podcast, highly recommend them. But they had a recent episode called Inside the Notorious Gridlock of Colorado's I-70. And it was responding to this article that was posted in Outside magazine titled Colorado's I-70 has America's most notorious ski traffic. Is there a solution? And it was a good coincidence it came out right around when we were doing this episode, because it does touch on like these ideas of how important like exclusivity is when accessing nature. Because what Chuck on the episode was arguing was that to really experience nature, it can't be easily accessible. Yeah. It is antithetical to the experience. So and it's not really even possible to find a balance.
Yeah. I've always kind of believed the thing of the best thing you can do for nature is live in a city.
Yeah.
Like you lower your overall kind of like, in Strong Towns, I talk about burn rate of like how much it takes to keep your lifestyle going. And if you drive a lot and own a large house, like you have a very large burn rate, not that we should all like, be eating the bugs and living in the pod kind of stuff. But yeah, I've always thought it's kind of trying to have your cake and eat it too, to live in a place like Denver and insist on like every weekend I must drive out to nature and clog the roads with everyone else who also thinks they have a divine right to it because they pay yay rent in Denver.
Yeah, I think so many bad things come out of trying to have your cake and eat it too, where it's like, I want urban amenities with rural amenities at the same time. I mean, that's the suburban experiment, but this case was talking about how like all of these people who live in Denver and the Denver metro area, like they will clog roads like I-70 and that's the culture there. And it's not really sustainable.
And they say in it that like the slopes aren't crazy crowded once you actually get there. So it is like a car bottleneck. Like this is a road that was once just like a sleepy thoroughfare. And now it's being turned into this just like funnel for people.
Yeah. I mean, they shouldn't expand it, but I bet if they tried to, it'd be really expensive because it goes through mountains, right?
Yeah, no.
And so
really
like
hard.
that is so much more engineering than if you were trying to expand a road out here where it's flat. It's like much more expensive.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting so much into class in this episode. Maybe I've had it on the mind.
No, do it more.
Yeah, no, really stir things up. Because I know class is culture and all that stuff. But not only just like visiting nature and skiing and all that is like always been a, upper echelon kind of thing. I think, I don't know. I've often noticed that kind of difference in like, in my friends, like there's those who grew up skiing and those who didn't. And then there's like, they self-sort in a lot of other different ways. I guess, I don't know, I skied as a kid, but it was like cheap in Germany, basically. Like, and there was a place that all the Americans would go, Garmisch, for skiing. But like, I also like the classic thing is like, bajillionaires all having houses out in like Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And yes, like the rich have always had country homes. And so that's like a constant, they'd like have a townhouse in the city and a country home. But I think this is kind of a new development where like, if you're rich in LA or rich in New York City, you have a house in Jackson Hole. And it just seems kind of greedy to me. Like everyone just wants to show like, look, I own a piece of this beautiful nature. And it's like, if everyone keeps doing that, there's not going to be any beautiful nature left.
Yeah.
And then the classic thing is to complain when more people move in because you got in at the perfect time. They got in at the immoral time, basically.
Yeah. Because like, how much time do they spend at their like Colorado home? Like 2 weeks out of the year.
Empty.
There's this really good Vice documentary. I can't remember the name, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes. But it was of, I think it's called Crested Butte. But Crested Butte. I think that's the name of the town, but it's of like basically like a like NIMBYs versus YIMBYs battle in this town over building some housing. And like the housing crisis affects a lot of people, but out there it was like pretty much if you're like a restaurant worker, you just have to sleep in your car.
Yeah.
Because I've never been to Colorado. I don't really know what it's like at all, but it does seem to have this like affluence in a certain way that's kind of like very like you're on the razor's edge. Like you just get excluded from society if you fall below a certain threshold. Yeah,
I always think that like if there is a late stage capitalism, if that is a useful term, I think it's when not even the rich are having fun. Yeah, is what I'd say. And when it's like when you're a little coffee shop, when you can't even get a cup of coffee because you can't, the economic system doesn't work in a way that the plebe cannot get to the coffee shop to make you the coffee. Like that's when like, and I've seen that used in talking about like San Francisco and stuff is just that like rich people are like, all right, like there's not even like, it's hard to get this level of service that we expect for what we're willing to pay people for that level of service.
Yeah, I'm really not a fan of San Francisco hate, but I mean, they do have these like retail theft problems that are kind of exclusive to their city.
Yeah. And then, kind of on the living in the car thing, like RVs are an interesting, I think, American kind of thing. Yeah. Bam. Let me slice up the classes again. So like, I feel like RVs are kind of in the middle because you can have a totally like nice balled out one, like bright and shiny, has all this like looks like a house on the inside, and you can also have like a kind of rusty looking Winnebago. But like I don't know, then for some reason trailer homes that is then down market. Once they're stationary, then they're down market. But then like tiny houses seem pretty upscale. It's probably the assumption that it's not your only house or that you chose this as well. You didn't like end up in it. Yeah, and you can like buy trailer homes for cheap, but tiny houses, it's usually like a I made it myself type of story kind of thing.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I mean, I think RVs are fun. I feel like there's something very like childish about them in a way where it's like
I want to put a house in a bus.
It's like this place where a house shouldn't be, and that's like a lot of childhood play is like that. It's like, oh, I made a house in the forest. It's like you put your house in
I've got
a
bathroom in my car.
So So I kind of like them in that way. I've only gone on one RV trip. It was to go to like Springfield, Illinois. I got to see like the Lincoln Museum and stuff like that. I do remember pretty vividly though, there being signs all over the RV of like, if you do this, you could die while you sleep. And
What?
because you need like, there's problems with carbon monoxide and you just got to be more careful.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I just didn't really think about that.
It is interesting.
Yeah. I've always been jealous of RVs. I just like the idea of self-containedness. Like you have everything you need in one thing, but it's like false. It's a false sense of that because you need a constant supply of gas basically and parking. So it's a very fragile kind of self-sustaining.
How many miles per gallon do those things get? I can't imagine.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I've always thought that like, I don't know, the left-right divide between like biking and driving. It's always like, it's very left wing to propel yourself purely on your own physical ability. It's very right wing to drive a large thing that needs a constant supply of foreign oil. Like that is a good American thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then like kind of rounding out on just American travel and domestic travel. I get a little sad when I think about like the kind of fallen glory sort of travel destinations. The jet age, international travel, air conditioning kind of ended a lot of places that were just like kind of valued by their proximity, basically. So my grandparents live in the Catskills, or the foothills of the Catskills in the Hudson Valley, but they both grew up really in the Catskills in this like resort town, basically, that would like just multiple times over its population in the summer, as all these like Jewish people would come up from the city and stay in these large like sprawling wood hotels. All of them have burned down now, basically, or in these little cottages, basically these cottage communities for the summer. And so New Yorkers, like, you could escape the heat of the city in the summer. I think husbands would stay in the city, and then like wives and kids would head out. But yeah, just once people could take, jets to either Florida or the Bahamas, it kind of ended.
I mean, I think I've experienced a place a little bit like that near like Sault Ste. Marie, which seems to be doing a little bit better. But yeah, like all these places that used to be like you could go camp out there, but like, why would you want to? Because, back when the Catskills, right, they were more popular. It's like, that was probably when like train travel was the only option.
Oh yeah, there'd be trains and buses that would go up. Yeah, these charter buses that would take like workers pre-flying and stuff.
So it was like a convenient distance by train, but like air travel was impossible yet to take you somewhere cooler.
Yeah, you've seen Dirty Dancing, right?
No.
Oh man, but that's like it's filmed in California, but it's supposed to take place in the Catskills, like at the height of that kind of thing. But
yeah, it's always so eerie and upsetting when you like see pieces of media that show places before they were hollowed out by like neoliberalism.
But it's actually a nostalgic movie. It's filmed in the 80s, but it's supposed to take place in like the 50s or the 60s. They don't totally land it aesthetically. I don't know, but I'm just picky with that sort of stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the movie where like people are grinding on each other, right?
Yes. Yeah, in the 50s and 60s. How does that
not happen? I feel like that should be like a movie set in California.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's because it has to be in like reference to the kind of constraint of like middle class Jewish life. Yeah. Oh, we got to watch this movie, man. It's so good. Sure. The dad is the best character in it. You'll see. But yeah, and then there's places that haven't faded like this. Like I visited Traverse City and I had a really good time. I was up there for a wedding in this very zhuzh area, even north of there. Neotawanta is the name of it. But like I was talking to people there about Traverse City, and they're like, "Oh, we come here all the time. We love it." And they were saying that like people from Chicago love it, Detroit, like people come up from Cleveland and everything. But outside of that, no one really knows about it. Like it is a regional retreat. Like it's a great place, but it's not take a plane from halfway across the country. Great. Yeah. But I think that I think that is a good, hardworking thing. I like that in the American like kind of ethos. I don't think that we need to all go to the best place. I think that that's kind of where Jackson Hole comes in. We figured out this is the most beautiful place that you can live in America. Yeah. And so people are like, all right, well, I only want the best one. Like, why do people always like, no, justice for the second banana cities, the second banana like travel destinations. Like, I don't know. Why do people need the best? I've never felt like I deserve the best in things more broadly.
Well, it's like you can also just have more of like an anti-essentialist view where it's like you like the variety. It's not about signaling to others. It's about your worldly understanding,
I say that I don't think I deserve the best. I think that's a complete lie, actually, because I always buy like kind of the nicest version of things if it's reasonable, like not the insanely nice. But I remember like telling my ex, like, oh yeah, I have to put premium in my car. And she's like, of course you take premium. You take premium in every other part of your life.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm the same way where it's like I cut out a lot of luxuries. Like I only really drink water, but then, the things that I do consume, like food, I usually buy organic.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. Do you buy organic?
No. Well, actually, I guess at Aldi, sometimes I end up buying organic.
Well, you know the rule. Do you know the rule?
What's the rule?
Okay, basically, if you consume the skin of a fruit or vegetable, then you should try to get it organic.
Yeah.
But like otherwise don't. And don't buy organic bananas. This is a good thing for listeners to know. The way they cultivate organic bananas is basically like, they don't use pesticides on the crops that you end up buying from the grocery store, but they put like a ring around the entire farm of basically like so many pesticides that the ground becomes like polluted. It kills workers prematurely from cancer.
They salt the land around
because there's
it.
very little benefit to you buying and consuming organic bananas over regular bananas. Just get the regular ones.
Yeah, I already was. But yeah, maybe I should focus on that. I don't know. I don't want to know how deep down the rabbit hole of like food safety I want to go. I mean, I cut out the seed oils, but that's all you're getting out of me, I think. In my own cooking, I've cut out the seed oils. I don't know. I was at Culver's over the weekend. I can't imagine they give a shit about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, in summary, even if you have the means to go internationally or something, there's probably some corner of America that you haven't explored.
Yeah, and I think what we sort of came to find through discussing this is that the forms of travel that Americans adopt, again, are like largely adopted through cultural preferences. But there's all these other things going on with like class signaling, and it's very complex because, we do live in what feels like a sort of like monoculture where there's not that much variety between states and cities. But yeah, people are trying to prove very different things to themselves and to others. And yeah, but just enjoy your travel regardless of what you do.
And take the train if it's not, 18 hours or something. If it's in 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, mix it up. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.